there is St. Jude.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Monday, October 5th, 2015, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us for the next 2 hours of news and interviews you can use for the cannabis community. Brought to you live and direct from Rolla J Studios in beautiful, legal Potland, Oregon. It's another great week. I had a great weekend football-wise. Both of my teams won big, so I got to do a lot of touchdown dancing. You can check out my Radical Russ YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter feeds for all of that silliness. But today we've got a lot of marijuana news to talk about, all sorts of things going on, not the least of which is in our Behind the Headlines segment today, where Reform CA, the Coalition for Cannabis Policy Reform in California, aka the big group of professionals, has put forth their marijuana legalization initiative for 2016. I had the opportunity to look through it today and made my notes on my Radical Russ Twitter feed. Today in Behind the Headlines, I'll give you the details on what legalization in California would look like if Reform CA makes the ballot and happens to pass. Also coming up on the show today in Drug War Data Mining, we take a look at some open records that were retrieved by USA Today and other journalists showing how DEA agents were not fired for doing all sorts of things that would get you and me fired. We'll tell you all about this coming up after the Behind the Headlines segment in Drug War Data Mining. Also on today's show, it's Monday, so we get our regular dose of cannabis science with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. He is the host of the Burning Issues podcast on CannabisRadio.com, and he devotes a segment each Monday to us to answer our questions about the latest studies and research regarding marijuana in America. We also take live calls in that segment. You can call in with your question toll free at 844-207-2346. And then at the end of the show today, we continue with our breakthrough information about Ohio's legalization. In our cannabinoid medicine update, we'll be speaking with Dr. Sue Sisley, MD. She is the only FDA-approved researcher who is allowed to study medical marijuana and its effect on veterans with post-traumatic stress. This is some groundbreaking research, and she's joined up with the International Cannabinoid Institute, which will be a leasee of one of the 10 licensed plots of land in Ohio, which has blown up all of the Stoners Against Legalization Ohio, their argument about a monopoly or oligopoly. Turns out there's 10 places where marijuana may be grown, but that doesn't limit how many people may be growing it. So we'll talk all about that. But that comes after the 420 radio news. We start off today in the headlines by telling you all about just how reefer mad Stephen Harper in Canada has become. We've got the decisions on sentencing in the remaining Kettle Falls 5 defendants. We've got a lawsuit in Colorado over the Eagle 20 fungicide. In Germany, Berlin will not be having any coffee shops anytime soon, thanks to a recent vote. We've got medical marijuana volunteers trying to get it on the ballot in Oklahoma, of all places, and another place in Florida looking seriously at decriminalization, or at least depenalization of marijuana. Plus, stay tuned for Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio. We'll hear from Portland's owned Bacon Dan with some new daily Toker tunes for the day. And we'll take a look at what Marijuana Policy Project thinks is a good legalization for Nevada, while they're against legalization in Ohio. It's got me fighting mad.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, your ticket to Seattle Hemp Fest.
As a police officer, I walked the beat, served on the Vice Squad and SWAT team, and became an expert on drug addiction. I saw firsthand the effects of Ohio's destructive marijuana laws. Simply put, they don't work. Ohio spends over $100 million each year on this failed effort. It's time for marijuana reform, so law enforcement can spend their time cracking down on real criminals and making Ohio a safer place for our families. Vote yes on 3.
Imagine life without taxes. Let New Era Certified Public Accountants, NewEraCPAs.com, handle your Cannabis 280E and tax strategy. Get your business prepared with New Era CPA's Cannabis Finance Bootcamp. NewEraCPAs.com, with years of experience in the industry, we are one of the nation's leading accounting firms for growers, dispensaries, and ancillary companies from Washington to California. NewEraCPAs.com. It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Replays of 420 Radio News are embeddable and shareable from our SoundCloud page at soundcloud.com/RadicalRuss. Now, the marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is your 420 Radio News for Monday, October 5th, 2015. The debate over legal marijuana usage in Canada has become one of the key issues in the federal election, pitting Liberal leader Justin Trudeau against the Conservative Stephen Harper, who has challenged his opponent's pro-legalization stance, claiming marijuana is, quote, infinitely worse, end quote, than tobacco.
Well, as I said before, there's just overwhelming and growing scientific and medical evidence about the bad long-term effects of marijuana. We've spent a couple of generations trying to reduce the usage of tobacco in Canada with a lot of success. Tobacco is a product that does a lot of damage. Marijuana is infinitely worse, and it's something we do not want to encourage.
On Friday, the 3 remaining defendants in the Kettle Falls 5 marijuana case, which involves Washington residents who grew their own medicine in a state that allowed them to do so, were sentenced to federal prison. Roland Gregg got 33 months, more than 2.5 years, while his mother, Rhonda Firestack Harvey, and his wife, Michelle Gregg, each received a 1-year sentence. The jury rejected allegations that the defendants distributed marijuana and conspired to do so, that they grew more than 100 plants, the cutoff for a 5-year mandatory minimum, over the course of 2 years, that they used firearms, otherwise known as their hunting guns, in connection with a drug crime, which is another 5-year mandatory minimum, and that Firestack Harvey maintained a place, otherwise known as her home, for the purpose of manufacturing and distributing marijuana. The one remaining charge, cultivation of more than 50 but fewer than 100 plants, did not carry a mandatory minimum penalty, leaving U.S. District Judge Thomas Rice wide latitude in sentencing. 2 marijuana users in Colorado filed a lawsuit Monday against a pot business they said used an unhealthy pesticide to grow their weed, a case that lawyers say is the first product liability claim in the nation involving the legal marijuana industry. The case underscores disagreement over what chemicals should be allowed in the cultivation of pot and leaves the plaintiffs facing a dilemma. The U.S. government still regards almost all marijuana as an illicit drug, and there are no federal safety guidelines for growing it. But the state of Colorado has approved a list of pesticides that are acceptable to grow pot, but it's far from complete and leaves out several pesticides that are commonly used on both food and tobacco. The lawsuit filed in state court targets the use of a fungicide called Eagle 20 EW by a Denver-based pot company called Livewell, where authorities quarantined thousands of plants earlier this year, saying they had been treated with the pesticide. A German pharmaceutical authority struck down proposed plans Monday that would have allowed for the creation of coffee shops in Berlin, similar to those in Amsterdam, where customers can recreationally buy different kinds of marijuana alongside a cup of coffee. Despite the setback, proponents of the law are still hopeful for the future of marijuana legalization in Germany. The cities of Hamburg, Bremen, Münster, and Dusseldorf have similar proposals on the table, and politicians are beginning to come around, according to activists. Legalizing medical marijuana is something Oklahoma has yet to do, but one group called Green the Vote is trying to change that. The group collected signatures outside the Tulsa State Fair today. They will need to obtain 120,000 signatures to get medical marijuana on next November's ballot, and they have 90 days to get them. Volunteers have been out since the first of the month trying to collect those signatures on petitions. So far, several thousand signatures across the state have been collected, but the deadline is December 30th. Broward County, Florida commissioners are expected to vote Tuesday on a new marijuana ordinance that would allow law enforcement officers to issue citations to those caught with small amounts of marijuana. Under the proposed ordinance, which is similar to that in Miami-Dade County and Key West, police officers will have the option of issuing a $100 civil citation to someone caught with 20 grams or less of marijuana instead of filing a misdemeanor criminal charge against that person. Officers would issue a $250 citation for repeat violators. Portland City Council is considering an ordinance that would require medical and recreational marijuana facilities to be located more than 1,000 feet away from each other. The current restriction is 1,000 feet medical to medical or 1,000 feet recreational to recreational. This has been your 420 Radio News for Monday, October 5th, 2015. I'm Russ Belville.
The Russ Belville Show, where the truth about marijuana gets more than a minute to speak.
The Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details. Welcome back, everyone. Time for us to go behind the headlines. And in the news today, the Control, Regulate, and Tax Cannabis Act of 2016 has officially been posted on the Reform CA website, reformca.org. And this would be the legalization plan that the entities that put together Prop 19 5 years ago, well, I guess it's 6 years ago now, have been working on. The big group supposedly with the interest of Drug Policy Alliance and Marijuana Policy Project, although there's some question about that. California NORML is also strongly behind this effort, as is Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And we have just learned that Dale Sky Jones, the proponent of the Prop 19 in 2010, has been joined by California NAACP's Alice Huffman as a co-proponent. So we have the civil rights leader involved in this marijuana legalization. Now, some of the basics that I can tell you about the language as I've read it so far is that it is going to absolutely legalize for all adults 21 years of age and older the possession of 1 ounce of marijuana in public. This brings it along with all the other 4 states that have legalized marijuana and the proposal in Ohio. 1 ounce is pretty standard. It would allow a home grow of 100 square feet, so a 10 by 10 area where you may grow as many plants as you can fit in a 10 by 10 square foot area, and you're allowed at home at the grow to legally possess the results of your harvests, the language that we hear in Colorado, which is technically speaking an infinite limit. So no matter how much marijuana you've got at your house, if you can say that you harvested that from your plants, it would be legal to possess. And a great addition for the protection of parents who use marijuana, that the home growing possession and use of marijuana shall not constitute child endangerment. They have to prove some actual danger to the child. Marijuana alone will not suffice. Now, they've also made some criminal penalties. They've changed a lot of the criminal penalties. They basically, in this, are repealing just about all the criminal penalties having to do with marijuana and replacing them with these new penalties. And what I've found so far is that there would be a ticket, an infraction of just a $100 fine for possession under the age of 21. So minors in possession, $100 fine. 18, 19, and 20-year-olds who share with one another, just a $100 fine. If a 21-year-old or older shares with someone 18, 19, or 20, so not the legal age of marijuana, but not a child, right? Someone who's 18 years old, 19, or 20, that will be a $500 infraction. But again, no criminal record for that. Other $500 infractions will include a 18, 19, or 20-year-old selling less than an ounce to someone over the age of 18, So illegal sales by someone under 21 but over 18, $500 fine. If someone under the age of 21 possesses anywhere from an ounce to 16 ounces, that is from an ounce to a pound under the age of 21, $500 fine. Anyone over the age of 21 possessing more than an ounce, $500 fine. That's, again, in public. Anyone caught toking in public would be a $500 fine. Now, that's pretty significant compared to some of the other states with their public toking fines. $500 is pretty strong. Toking where prohibited, $500. That's if, it's not in public, but it's someplace where it's been prohibited. For example, your landlord prohibiting you from smoking in your own home, which they're allowed to do. That could be a $500 fine. Toking in a car, even if it's a passenger in a car, can be $500 fine. Public view or unlocked plants. That is, if you're growing your home grow in public view or your plants are somewhere that they are accessible, not locked up, you can get a $500 fine for that. Then we move up to those activities that will be wobblers. These could either be a $500 infraction or they could be a misdemeanor, 6 months in jail and a $1,000 fine, depending on the prosecutor's discretion. Those would include possession over a pound, unlawful sale up to a pound, cultivating plants if you're under the age of 21, and cultivating greater than 100 square feet. Could be a misdemeanor, or it could be a $500 fine. A misdemeanor $250 fine will apply to juveniles under the age of 18 who possess at school or who sell marijuana. Then, misdemeanors that will be guaranteed misdemeanors, 6 months, $1,000 fine, include anyone who sells more than a pound, anyone 18 or older who possesses at a school, or anybody who is toking while driving or piloting. That's boats, trains, planes, automobiles, motorcycles, scooters, etc. Then there's felony wobblers. These can either be felonies or charged as misdemeanors, depending on the prosecutor. Furnishing to minors, export out of state, growing on federal lands, using marijuana as a cover for other illegal drugs, using weapons or violence in your marijuana crime, or making any sort of hash oil unlicensed. Butane, propane, hexane could be a felony, could be a misdemeanor. Employing anyone under the age of 21 at your marijuana facility or unlawful commercial cultivation greater than $10,000 worth can be a felony or a misdemeanor. Then the fines can also include $50 per ounce over your limits, $10 per square foot over your limits, or $2,000 a day fines. Bosses can still fire you. Landlords can still ban it in your rental. Localities can still call it a public nuisance, but it will not interfere with the Medical Marijuana Act, and there's some patient protection for schools, landlords, and employer discrimination.
Hey, this is great, man.
There's plenty more to learn in there. There are 8 different types of licensees, a 2-year residency requirement, some prioritization for the existing medical marijuana industry as far as getting licenses, and localities cannot ban medical marijuana without a public vote and cannot ban home grow. Reform CA looks pretty good, folks.
Get the latest updates on The Russ Belville Show by following Radical Russ on Twitter and liking The Russ Belville Show on Facebook.
Get.Buzz. .Buzz is the internet platform that fuels community interest, excitement, and new experiences. .Buzz is the premier online destination for internet users seeking the latest news on a variety of topics. .Buzz appeals to groups active in blogging, communications, journalism, advertising, and marketing. .Buzz offers registrants a stronger alternative to the shrinking namespace of existing top-level domain names, such as .com, .net, and .org. Get your name now at get.buzz. The Fingerboard extension has fretted instruments to enhance your creativity. It has new and used guitars and banjos from beginning to high class. The Fingerboard extension has National Resophonic, Husson Dalton, Larrabee, Heritage and Recording King guitars, and Mike Ramsey, Wildwood, Gold Tone, and Recording King banjos. The Fingerboard extension also has drum stuff, used gear, and parts. Stop by the Fingerboard extension, downtown Corvallis, Oregon at 120 Northwest 2nd, or check out the inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com and reverb.com. arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Sometimes in the drug war data mines, we like to take a look at the official records that you can find from U.S. and state government agencies through the use of Freedom of Information Act requests, or in your state, they might be called Open Records Request or Sunshine Act Request or whatever it might be called. But basically, these acts require a transparency from our government, and with some exceptions, you can usually get just about anything that you're looking for. Well, I happened upon a piece in the USA Today that made great use of these Freedom of Information Act requests, and I'm just ready to tell you all about it because, as you know, the only reason I'm talking to you here today is because 8 years ago, the marijuana metabolites detected in my armpit hair led my employer of the prior 2 years to fire me from my information technology career. Gosh, it's just too bad my life choices didn't lead me to a career in the DEA. The Drug Enforcement Administration. In the DEA, I could have enjoyed sex parties with prostitutes. I could have beaten a prostitute over a payment dispute. I could have, in the DEA, taken gifts of money and weapons from the drug cartels. I could have falsified official records. I could have driven impaired in my DEA vehicle, lost my firearm, and lost my DEA notebook computer. I could have hung out with criminals and distributed drugs and worked to conceal that from my superiors. I could have beat my spouse or beat a civilian or misused my authority. I could have violated state law, violated people's civil rights, and sexually harassed my coworkers. I could even be arrested. I could have accepted bribes. And most of all, from my point of view, I could have used drugs and failed a random drug test. And at the DEA, at worst, I'd face a suspension of a few days, but more likely I'd just get a letter of caution or a letter of reprimand. That's the conclusion I draw after reading this USA Today piece. It's called DEA Agents Kept Jobs Despite Serious Misconduct. Talk about a underappreciation of the situation. Serious misconduct. This was after the revelations of the DEA's Colombian sex parties. Remember that? That's what actually cost DEA Administrator Michelle Lenhart her job. Not the fact that she didn't know couldn't say marijuana was less harmful than heroin. Not the fact that she continued to allowed her agents to prosecute medical marijuana cases after the Congress had passed a law specifically saying you cannot spend the money to do that. None of that was what brought her down. It was a sex party. A Colombian sex party where the DEA agents were enjoying sex with prostitutes bought and paid for by the Colombian cartels in the DEA buildings, in the DEA facilities, where like laptops and computers and documents are all lying around for anyone to be able to find, right? So what USA Today found when they dug into this, they found that 50 DEA agents that the Board of Professional Conduct, the DEA's own board, recommended should be terminated. Should be fired. Get rid of these bad apples. Out of those 50, only 13 were actually fired over the past 5 years. And then DEA had to take some of those 13 back after other agencies intervened on the fired agents' behalf. I tell you, I've got the link to this log, and you can find it on my, I wrote this up for Marijuana Politics. This is up on High Times, so this will be up on High Times tomorrow, and you'll find the link there. But if you read that official log from 2011 through 2015, it'll make you wonder whether you're looking at the records of DEA agents or looking at the records of the drug criminals they're supposed to be apprehending. Many of the agents on the list received letters of caution. Now, the letter of caution is the lowest possible sanction you can get. And they got letters of caution for activities like loss or theft of evidence, both drug and non-drug evidence, tampering with evidence, theft of defendant's property, falsification of official records, improper use of company credit cards, making threats, sexual harassment, arrests for state or local law violations. Any of those things would probably get you or me fired from our jobs. But the agents, they get letters of caution. And letters of caution don't even affect an agent's work record. It's merely a warning that if he or she continues that behavior, then there might be a letter of reprimand, suspension, or termination. Most disturbing, of course, is the case of Daniel Chong, the young man DEA left imprisoned in a holding room unattended for 5 days without food and water in 2012. While Chong won a $4.1 million settlement over that torture that left him dehydrated, hallucinating, and ready for death, the 6 DEA agents investigated over the incident won the right to keep working as DEA agents. They received 7 days suspension, 5 days suspension, and 4 letters of reprimand, respectively, according to the Department of Justice's letter to Judiciary Committee Chairman Senator Charles Grassley. So, hey, crime doesn't pay unless you work for the DEA, and then apparently you get to keep your job almost with no possibility of losing it, no matter what you do. Now, a few of them were fired. There were a few that were fired. Some got suspensions. Some got letters of reprimand. But we're talking about a document for 5 years, 2011 through 2015, that runs over a dozen pages long, full of all of these complaints that the Professional Bureau brought forth, with very, very few of them actually leading to termination. All right, stay tuned. When we come back, we got Dr. Mitch Earlywine in our Cannabis Q&A. Get your questions ready and dial us up at 84 420 Radio.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. This is the Russ Belville Show.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome. At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio.
It's time for the Russ Belville Show's Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Dr. Earlywine is a professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and a leading author and researcher on cannabinoids and health, who pins the Ask Dr. Mitch column for High Times magazine. Get your questions ready in our live chat or call in to 971-533-7111 now.
All right, welcome everybody to Cannabis Q&A. We've got Dr. Mitch Earlywine on Skype. How you doing, Dr. Mitch?
Having a great day. How are you?
Oh, it's amazing. We're in the high 70s or lower 80s in an October day in Portland. It must be the legalization. That's the only thing I can blame it on.
It makes everything better.
I guess so. That's really nice. Inviting everyone out there to get into our chat room at 420radio.org. If you got some questions for Dr. Mitch, I'll be looking in on the chat room for that. Also, our phone lines are open toll free at 84 420 radio. That's 844-207-2346. Before we get into the latest studies and stories of the day, we always let Dr. Mitch bring up whatever he might have on the agenda. So what's new, Dr. Mitch?
Well, this stuff you sent me, Russ, is superb. I don't know how you'd feel about talking about that, the Vic study on the gateway.
Yeah, let's go to that right away. University of Victoria, British Columbia, talking about how marijuana is not a gateway drug, something we've known for a while, but what does this study tell us? What does this add?
It's funny because the coverage makes it all sound like a gateway drug, but really these data support marijuana as sort of an exit drug. And many of you know Philippe Lucas, who's just a stellar guy, and he and I have actually collaborated on data like this before, but he's got a new data set essentially showing that folks who are involved in the medical cannabis system up there in Canada are much more likely to report that they got off a hard drug, especially if they're young and using medical cannabis, rather than cannabis leading to a hard drug. And it's funny because this wasn't really designed to test the gateway, but it sort of shows the backhanded way out, if you will, that cannabis may really be a nice path to getting off of, say, problem opiate use or chronic binge drinking.
You know, I somehow got caught up in a discussion online where Dr. Mark Kleiman was involved with it, and he actually conceded to that there might not, he hadn't seen anything really yet toward the substitution effect with alcohol in cannabis, but said there certainly seems to be one with opioids in cannabis. Does this back that up?
In fact, it does, and it's a huge sample. He's got over 400 people, and you don't see studies of medical users that are usually this numerous. And so I feel like the statistical power is there, and that we can really, take some confidence in these results. The alcohol substitution at the recreational level, some studies say yes, some studies say no, and I understand Mark's point, but I feel like his tendency to lean towards federal regulation being the answer to every problem on earth may not be the way to interpret data like this.
And even with this data, there is some controversy among rehab professionals, addiction scientists about this idea of substituting marijuana for a harder drug. Some of them, especially the AA types, think you're just trading one addiction for another, which I'd say at least this one doesn't kill you. What do you have to say about that?
Well, it's funny because I've never been a fan of the idea that you have to be drug free for your entire life, as I suck down my caffeinated soda here. So it may be my own bias, but the clincher here is we're talking about a drug that doesn't alter your liver function or make you die the way the opiates and alcohol can. So if this is a step towards becoming completely drug free, that's great, and you'll certainly live long enough to consider abstinence if you make this substitution.
All right, let's take a look at some other research. This one coming from the University of Texas at Dallas. The study release says marijuana brain study offers new substance by including nicotine use. Not a new substance, but there's new information because now they're including nicotine use. Hasn't this always been a confounder in a lot of marijuana studies?
Well, and what's funny is it also shows up in like the neuropsych of cannabis things and things like that. So this is really, I'm glad that they're bringing this issue to the forefront. But what they found, I'm wondering if it's really going to replicate, and they're, emphasizing these wild links between hippocampus size and memory functioning, but only in certain groups and not in others. And with a sample this small, I think it may not be something we should put a whole lot of stock into, but I love that they're actually attending to tobacco use on this. And in fact, the very first vaporizer paper I ever published, wanted to emphasize, look, if you're smoking cigarettes, vaporizer ain't enough to help. You gotta put down the tobacco, man. And it's sort of the same situation here where tobacco works on a very different neurotransmitter system, and nicotine is a pretty hard agonist, whereas in the cannabinoid system, THC is really just kind of a partial agonist. So these links aren't going to work exactly the same way.
All right. And then there was another.
Sorry.
Samuel Jackson breaking into our show here.
Well, whenever I have those newspaper ads open, for some reason, he just seems to show up.
What's in your wallet, Dr. Mitch?
Exactly.
Let's see. There's a story out of the LA Times here, and I read this study in some other places. Kids' feelings about marijuana in 6th grade may predict future risk of drunk driving. And the thing that stood out to me on this was, oh my God, now that kids know the truth about cannabis, they don't think it's as bad. Well, yeah, it's not going to turn their brain into a fried egg and be like an atom bomb on Bikini Island. Maybe they are predicting a little less risk from it. But is there anything to this?
Well, the fact that they're linking an attitude about marijuana to subsequent drug driving, what theory would suggest that those two things ought to go together? I mean, it's pretty much a fishing expedition here. And if you read down, it says 12-year-olds who felt most confident that they could resist marijuana use wound up being 89% more likely to mix alcohol and drugs with cars. I'm just like, why don't you guys look at every single variable you have in the data set and just make it into a giant story? If decreased perceptions of risk about marijuana led to marijuana problems, I would be really impressed. But the rest of this is just kind of a strange collection of correlations and reports. And I like that sixth graders actually have some kind of valid information about cannabis. And I hope it would lead to intelligent use down the line, not some crazy correlation with unsafe driving that has no real theoretical link.
Okay, well then I'm not going to worry about this one too much. Let's go on to the next one. This one came out of a local paper, the Bend Bulletin, and it's just one of many that are reporting on scares coming from Colorado and Washington. This one says, study links car accidents to marijuana legalization.
So, in fact, when you read the article, you see there are 3 data sets, and one of them has a slight increase in estimates of car accidents in marijuana legalization areas. But in truth, what they're doing a lot of is saying, oh, look, now the folks who are involved in accidents are more likely to test positive for cannabis. But they're using these urine screens where, what a surprise. You have more people in legalization states are using marijuana and may have metabolites in their urine, but that doesn't mean it had anything to do with the accident, as we've emphasized time and again.
And, I got to thinking about this in another way, too, is that when we know that marijuana is going to show up active up to 5 days in a chronic user, inactive up to 30 days in a chronic user, and less so in less chronic users, when we're talking about someone who's a once-a-month cannabis user versus someone who's a once-a-week cannabis user, there doesn't seem to be much differentiation in the statistics. They'd both be considered monthly cannabis users. But I would posit that as legalization increases access, the guy who is doing once a month might now be doing once a week, and therefore more likely to be showing up as marijuana positive on some of these tests. So that there's not more people smoking pot, but the people who are smoking pot get the chance to do it more often.
And what's curious is it really, when you look closely, has nothing to do with their performance at the time. So if we had a roadside sobriety test on all these folks, I would be much more impressed. But the fact that in legalization areas, more people are showing up testing positive for having smoked marijuana sometime recently is just a sign of the times, not anything to do with actual accidents. And then we've got new data out suggesting that, folks are actually markedly better at compensating for cannabis-related effects when they do drive. I just think driving high is a total buzzkill, so I'm not going to be doing this. But at least the notion that this is causing some kind of increase in accidents, the data just don't really support that.
Yeah, I'm sure if we took a cross-section of people in recent crashes, we'd find a significant increase in how many of them were married gay people.
There you go.
It doesn't mean that gay marriage is causing freeway accidents, folks. All right, we got one more here before we go, but before we go, let me remind everyone that if you want to get a question taken care of privately, you can always email Dr. Mitch at 420research@gmail.com. You can also listen to his podcast on cannabisradio.com, Burning Issues, on which I will be a guest soon, I understand. But
Indeed.
Let's get to this last one, which says, oh my, medical marijuana appears safe and effective in treating chronic pain. Who knew?
Yeah, I know this is quite the startling finding.
What?
But this is actually the largest sample ever. Dr. Ware up in Canada has data on literally a couple of hundred people now. And they do the hemming and hawing about, people who are experienced users and who really take care and blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is cannabis is great for chronic pain, especially if you're smart enough to know how to monitor your dosage and to not do silly things like get really stoned and drive. So there have been known increases in negative consequences, and there have been delightful reports on relief from pain. And I'm thinking this is really the wave of the future, that we're all going to look forward to an old age that's relatively pain-free thanks to the plant.
All right. Well, before you go, Dr. Mitch, since you mentioned Canada, I wanted to get your take on this quote recently from Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper.
Well, as I said before, there's just overwhelming and growing scientific and medical evidence about the bad long-term effects of marijuana. We've spent a couple of generations trying to reduce the usage of tobacco in Canada with a lot of success. Tobacco is a product that does a lot of damage. Marijuana is infinitely worse, and it's something we do not want to encourage.
Infinitely worse, Dr. Mitch. Now, I may only have a high school education, but infinitely worse is impossible, isn't it?
Indeed. Not only that, I think there's really one domain where cannabis does have a bigger impact than tobacco, and that's on hunger. So nicotine is bound to decrease your appetite. Cannabis is bound to increase it. But otherwise, as far as respiratory risks and other things that are really relevant, cannabis doesn't hold a candle to the necrotic effects of nicotine, and I'm afraid the Prime Minister needs to take a closer look at those data.
Yeah, Prime Minister Stephen Harper in a electoral battle right now for federal control in Canada with the Liberal leader Justin Trudeau, who has been known to smoke a bowl or two with Mark Emery. So marijuana is becoming a big issue in that federal campaign. It's going to be a big issue in the federal campaign in 2016 here in the United States of America as well. Again, folks, check out Dr. Mitch on his podcast, Burning Issues, on CannabisRadio.com, and join us every Monday at 3:30 for this segment on Cannabis Q&A. Dr. Mitch, thanks for your expertise, and we'll talk to you next week.
Man.
All right, stay tuned, folks. When we come back, we've got another guest on the show, another doctor, 2 doctors for the price of one. Dr. Sue Sisley, MD, the FDA-approved researcher on PTSD, veterans, and medical marijuana, is back to talk about why the Ohio Amendment will provide the greatest scientific advancement in American cannabis research we have ever seen. Stay tuned.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
Adam Hand of Handmade Apparel produces quality custom designs for t-shirts, hats, and other apparel. Handmade Apparel is the official design shop for 420 Radio, among many clients who rely on Adam Hand for everything from short-run custom projects to full-run clothing lines. Visit handmadeapparel.biz to browse the selection of handmade gear or to get a personal quote for your own designs. Handmade Apparel, a proud supporter of 420radio.org. In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
This is a vial of crack, rock cocaine. As you may have noticed, it doesn't come with a warning label. If it did, it might tell you that smoking crack affects the brain, the nervous system, the lungs, and the heart. It would also say that crack can kill you. The problem is, no one knows exactly how much it takes to do it. So every time you try it, it's a guessing game. And if you guess wrong with this stuff, you die.
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420radio.org. You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, we've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher on Twitter. Oregon has joined Washington and Colorado in legalizing marijuana. We're Portland NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws chapter in Portland, Oregon. Join us as we celebrate the launch of an exciting new era in marijuana freedom in Oregon. Our job has just begun. Powerful interests want to white out the most important portions of Oregon's legalization law. By joining Portland NORML, you add your voice to the thousands who voted for Measure 91 and want it to be implemented as written. The people have spoken. Now it is time for the legislature to obey the will of the people. Find out more about Portland NORML at portlandnormal.org. Attend our monthly membership meetings on the fourth Saturday of the month. See our website for more details. Portland NORML, ensuring responsible adult marijuana consumers are afforded the same rights, privileges, and responsibilities as beer drinkers. 420 Radio, your ticket to the High Times Cannabis Cups. While humans have been using cannabis for medicinal purposes for over 5,000 years, medical science is only beginning to unlock the secrets of the endocannabinoid system and the promise of cannabinoid medicines. Join us now for the latest cannabinoid medicine update.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We are joined by, I think it's Garrett who's on the line. Garrett, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Russ. How are you?
Great. It's Garrett Greenlee from the International Cannabinoid Institute, and we spoke to him last week, Friday, regarding a big press release is going out, a big press conference going out tomorrow at the Ohio State House, and you've got a guest to speak with us as well, but why don't you tell our listeners real quick about what's happening tomorrow, and then let's bring on our guest.
Super. That sounds great, Russ. And I'm also going to give you another number. She had to actually step out to her hotel. So I'm going to have you call her on her direct line.
Okay.
But I'd be happy to tell you what we've got going on here at the State House tomorrow. Big event. We are announcing tomorrow the International Cannabinoid Institute. We have secured a location, and we'll be announcing our site here in Ohio. That's tomorrow at 2 o'clock at the State House, West Plaza, on the steps of the State House. That same time, we're also going to be announcing and unveiling the framework of a brand new, first-of-its-kind insurance program for patients in need, and that will include veterans with PTSD, and Dr. Sisley's very excited to talk about that program.
Excellent. So if you
Russ,
can, send me...
If you like,
send me that number via email. We don't want to give it out over the air.
Nope. I just emailed it to you. You've got it in your box right now.
Okay, fantastic. Looking forward to that. Now, in researching this, we had talked on Friday about how this was kind of the breakthrough against the claim of this being some sort of monopoly situation. And the breakthrough here is that looking in the amendment, and I'll read you the exact line from the amendment. It says, the growth and cultivation of marijuana and medical marijuana and the extraction of cannabinoids from marijuana and medical marijuana for sale and medical use within this state shall be lawful only at licensed MGCE facilities, marijuana growth, cultivation, extraction facilities. Subject to the exceptions set forth herein, there shall be only 10 MGCE facilities which shall operate on the following real properties, and then they list 10 properties in 10 counties and continue by saying that one or more of these structures in which the real property, the growth, cultivation, harvesting, processing, packaging, preparation, and labeling of marijuana is taking place shall be lawful, and no local zoning, land use laws, agricultural regulations, or other regulations shall prohibit the creation of transferable and recordable legal descriptions or separate tax parcel numbers for any of the aforesaid real properties. In other words, the owners of the lands that constitute the facilities may subdivide that land on to their lessees, like the International Cannabinoid Institute, and best of all, the local governments can't interfere with the production of marijuana at those constitutionally protected facilities through zoning or land use laws. And that's going to make it really attractive to the scientists who require years of uninterrupted research and want that guarantee that it'll always be around. Now, the acreage on these 10 constitutionally protected areas works out to 13.9 million square feet. In Washington State, the largest marijuana grows that they got are 30,000 square feet. So we're talking anywhere from 19 to 111 of the largest Washington grows would fit in some of these county grows. So Garrett, we spoke to him earlier, and he said, quote, "We met with landowners and offered to lease their properties just as any farmer might do with a landowner. These Ohioans have been very receptive to our concept, and we're now in the final stages of site selection." And on Friday's show, of course, Garrett told us, quote, "I think there will be over 100 growers in Ohio," end quote. Now, we're trying to reach Dr. Sisley on the number that Garrett has given me, but unfortunately, we're not getting an answer on that call. Dr. Sisley, of course, is the principal investigator for the only FDA-approved randomized controlled trial looking at whole plant marijuana for combat veterans with treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress. And she now has signed on with the International Cannabinoid Institute to do this research in Ohio at their future research facility. They'll be announcing where this location will be at tomorrow's press event. This is taking place tomorrow at the State House in Ohio. Dr. Sisley will be responding and speaking there at the event. And we're unable to get her on her cell line. So we will go back to Garrett here and see if we can talk to him some more about this situation in Ohio. Dr. Sisley, of course, was working for this at the Arizona State University when they decided to can her over her wanting to do marijuana research. She's tried to get this through in Colorado as well and has been unable to make any headway in the state of Colorado. These constitutional protections mean that any of the lessees, like Dr. Sisley and the ICI, will have the same level of protection under that state's constitution and protection from the locals being able to do anything about that marijuana grow. Let's see if we got Garrett back on the line. Garrett, can you hear me?
I got you, Russ.
Hey, we tried Dr. Sisley's number. Unfortunately, there was no answer. So just coming back to you here to wind things up. But I was telling the listeners about Dr. Sisley's research and why it was so important to have the guarantees, the constitutional guarantees, like what Ohio is providing.
Yes. Yeah, and that is really what we saw as the institute as a difference between other states, because we're not simply granted a license that can be amended, changed, or revoked. We actually have the constitutional protection to allow for long-term research and development. So any type of long-term study, investors putting money together for a research study could be guaranteed that will be there for a long time. The facility that we're putting up will have a 99-year contract that will be part of the Constitution in Ohio. We have a guaranteed long-term location.
That's just amazing. And with that and all of the other benefits that this Issue 3 legalization will provide, it's getting more and more difficult to dismiss this as just some sort of money grab by the investors. Have you been hearing from the opponents of this issue, and is that one of their concerns?
You know, it is. And I think that speaks to really one of the bigger concerns that people had when they saw the amendment, especially when the fact that, a lot of the amendments, a lot of the growers were going to be concentrating on the personal grow side. And obviously that's going to be the largest segment of the market. But what we figured out, we ran the numbers in terms of projections for the medical side. Between the Institute, the 20,000 square foot grow we have there, and our commercial partner, and they're projecting to have a 300,000 square foot grow. Between our two facilities, we can take care of the majority of the patient's needs out of this one single facility, out of this one single site. So we're talking over about 122,000 pounds of medical marijuana we can grow between our two facilities, and those meet the projections that we've made for the entire patient market here in Ohio.
Wow.
So the patient advocates that are very concerned that the patient's needs would not be addressed because everyone's concentrating on the personal use, the recreational market here, we figured out that we can, and it doesn't have to be all from our facility, but if it needs to be, we can handle almost the entire need for all the patients here in Ohio at about 120,000 pounds a year is what we could produce.
Well, some of the opponents that I hear from are making hay out of the fact that in a lot of places in the initiative it says that Ohio shall do this and that, but when it comes to medical marijuana, Ohio may do this or that. Does that concern you?
To be honest, it did initially until I had this site locked in and the commitment from the landowner that he was committed to 100% medical and using the genetics that we developed out of the International Cannabinoid Institute. We're going to provide him with all the genetics that he needs. And until I got that commitment, I had some concerns myself. But now, to be honest with you, it doesn't matter what the state or the commission decides to do. We can, with our facility and our commercial grow, we can handle the needs of the patients in Ohio.
Wow. Well, that's really, really good news. So tell folks again the details on the press event that's happening tomorrow.
Okay. 2 o'clock at the State House, West Plaza. We will have Sue Sicily making the announcements. Should be joined by myself, some other members of the community. We're announcing a patient ombudsman program that we've committed at ICI to have an office with a patient ombudsman program here in Ohio. First one of its kind that I know of that will have a facility that's centrally located that patients can come in and address their concerns. And that's part of one of the initiatives that we have is to take care of the patients and make sure we are addressing the concerns in terms of the amount of product that's needed, the types of strains, everything from concentrates to flower. We want to make sure that the patient's needs are being addressed, and we're going to announce that program as well, along with, we think, one of the best and first of its kind, a patient insurance program that has 3 distinct funding sources, and we're not talking small dollars here. I mean, it's in the tens of millions of dollars we'll be able to put into this program through those 3 individual funding sources.
That's amazing stuff. Constitutionally protected medical marijuana research, a production facility that can handle the whole state, and these protections that you're talking about. It sounds like win-win-win for everybody involved. Garrett, I want to thank you so much for standing up and finding a way to make this work despite all the naysayers out there. If people want to know more about this online, real quick, give us the website they can go to.
Certainly, Russ. It's ICIRF, that's ICI Research Foundation.org.
All right.
And we're inviting people to go online and take a survey. 12 questions. Tell us your concerns. Tell us where, in your opinion, we should direct our initial research studies. We're going to publish this.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.